Hello! Hello,
Hello.
welcome to the Dungeon Master Deep Dive. I'm very excited today to be with our one of our newest Dungeon Master adds to our roster, which is Edward Spence, who has agreed to come to D&D in a Castle and run a game for us this summer, July 13th to 17th, at our castle in the UK, which is in the background of this shot that some of you might be able to see, looking very medieval and stone-like and all the castle-y things. So, welcome, Edward. Thanks so much for coming and chatting with us today.
Tara, you're so welcome. It's so nice to see you again.
Yes, yes. So this is going to be your first time coming to D&D in a Castle. I just want to say there's a QR code in the corner of the screen if people want to read up a little bit more. Also, if you're watching and you want to ask questions, go ahead and pop them in and we'll try to get to them in the course of our chat today. So this is your first time coming to D&D in a Castle, but you've run lots of games of D&D in the past. Ed, tell us a little bit about your relationship with Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, it was born, I think, like a lot of people who have recently got into the hobby out of lockdown, trapped inside and looking for something to do. I'd sort of dabbled a bit as a player like 1 or 2 years beforehand. But it was sort of just before that, a group of friends and we'd started a home game, and then once everything shut down and we weren't able to see each other at all, D&D became this real lifeline between us, and so we kept it up virtually throughout, and we ended up streaming it, and then one thing kind of snowballed to the other, and this hobby became sort of I don't like to use the word, but it became content creation, and then I don't know, recently it's become much more a means of meeting other incredible storytellers and trying to like veer away from the idea of it being about content and more about providing stories and, dare I say it, art as well. But I think also escapism. I mean, like, I think
There's a
especially, yeah,
there's
especially.
a real value in that. Like, I think, D&D stories, they save lives. They literally do. And I think the pandemic was, as you say, a highlight of the power of storytelling and the necessity of storytelling and connection. And I think, I have very lofty sentiments on the on the whole subject, but you're not going to get too lofty for me. I'll say that. Other viewers might, what are you talking about? It's Dungeons and Dragons. And yeah, it's a game you can play as a 12-year-old. Like, okay, but also a lot of those 12-year-olds, that's their mental health. So, it seems light, but I think it's something that we're missing in our adult lives that we don't talk about a lot, which is, we don't make space for fun, for game, for connection for its own sake, for stories for their own sake. And I just think Dungeons and Dragons is all of those things just wrapped up in one glorious experience. So that's what we're trying to deliver at D&D in a Castle. So how do you deliver all of those things? Tell us a little bit about your approach to dungeon mastering and how you create the game you want to create.
Oh wow. Well, I'll put aside all self-deprecation for a
Please, I
moment.
know it's hard for British people, but
I know it really is. But no, I mean, in terms of my approach, I like to joke that I'm a fairly lazy DM, and that's not true. But I think what I mean by that is, I don't have a story until I know who the players around the table are going to be, or indeed until I know who their characters are going to be. So everything that I run, be it D&D or any other system, it comes from the players first and foremost. So I will put together a world building document, one of which I'm working for D&D in a Castle right now. But I will put that together and I will send that to the players, and I'll give them kind of a vague overview of what kind of touchstones we'll be looking at in terms of genre, in terms of tone, in terms of inspiration. That could be music or film or literature or what have you. And I will basically just send them a list of questions, and it will be things like, what does your character do? Like, who are your family? Where is home? Do you still feel connected to home? All these sorts of questions. And then at the end of that, it will be, and now give me one secret that you don't want anyone else around the table to know. And then off the back of that, that will be our story. Like I'll receive these often pages and pages of questions, depending on how much the players want to write, and the story will be formed around that. Any NPCs that they mention, any family members, any lovers, any friends, any conflict, all of that will be baked into the story. In I like to feel a fairly cinematic, quite emotionally charged, but in a very delicately and safely handled space. I think player safety is always key, especially when we are dealing into, like you say, it is escapism, but it is a form of escaping into a part of ourselves, and it it's not therapy, but it can be very therapeutic. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to bear in mind everyone's comfort levels around the table, especially with something like D&D in a castle where many of the people around the table won't know each other.
Yeah. 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 We had a just to counteract your laziness sentiment and your desire for self-deprecation, we have a comment in the comments. Edward is truly one of the absolute best DMs and performers. You all are lucky to have him. So love for Edward in the comments from your fans. And certainly you can highly recommended by our other dungeon masters who suggested we get in touch and see if you wanted to come to the castle. So as you say, you build the campaigns around the players, and that is a common sentiment among our dungeon masters. They like to know who they're gaming with, who's in their party, what kind of game they're into. But obviously they also are coming to play with you. They're coming to play your game. And that is the sort of approach that we take at D&D in a Castle, is we try to provide a game you can't get anywhere else. That's what we're all about. And so part of that is you can't get necessarily a 3-day intensive Edward Spence game, outside of, I mean, maybe they can, but that's one of the special things about it, is being able to play your game particularly. And that's why we don't put a lot of constraints on what you do in your game. It's mostly about the game that's yours. It's like, okay, so I do this game for streaming. I do this game for this thing. I master run this game, but your game, the game you're like, okay, if I could run the ultimate game of D&D, I'm gonna do this. So that's kind of what we want to give our dungeon masters the scope to do and the opportunity to do. And then people are attracted to whatever game they like and they really want to go for. So what would you say is your game? What is the sort of Edward Spence D&D? If you were like, I can do whatever I want, and this is what I just want to go all in on this, and I want to create this, what would be the things that you would bring
Oof,
into that experience?
hard moral choices. Hard moral choices, but I think a certain element. So I come from theatre predominantly. So my background is in acting and immersion, and so I think I tend to bring, um, in addition to, like, the usual things that you want from a DM, like voices and that kind of slightly theatrical element to kind of bring you all in. I think I am interested in the immersion of it and how you feel stepping away from the table.
Mm,
Um, I think most of the games that I run tend to be very emotionally charged, and I think especially when you only have a finite amount of time to tell a story, I think you find a table that takes tremendously big swings, and as a GM, I tend to lean into those big swings, and kind of push people to uh, I think explore or, I guess, exercise things within their characters. Like if someone gives me an emotional carrot, I'm absolutely going to like take it and turn it, into something that is perhaps not what they expect, but that will give them the catharsis that they need. I think maybe
mm,
that's the word, catharsis.
mm.
I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of the stories that I like to run are ones that are full of catharsis and can be overwhelmingly oppressive. But ultimately, it's hope. I don't think the GM's job, and this is a personal preference, but my job as a GM is not to be an antagonist to the players. I think my job is always to serve their story, and to give them a framework, within which that story is contained, to be the ribs of, like, the lungs that they are breathing. Um, and to give them structure. But I think for me, it's about giving them these big cinematic moments that feel like they have weight, which therefore means the player's choices have weight. I don't like railroads, so you won't find that over the week that you're playing with me, I don't think. So yeah, cinematic, emotional, bold. Um, we'll all probably have a bit of a cry afterwards, and we will do so safely together.
I'm here for the tears, man. There's no story without conflict. So you may not be the enemy, but you are the one making the conflict in a way, giving them options to engage. Whether that's it doesn't have to be combat conflict, but narrative combat conflict at least. I'm looking at your outline or your teaser for your campaign that you're going to be running at the castle, and I will just say this castle is almost full. There are 2 spots at your table at the moment. So there's space at each table at D&D and Castle. There's a maximum of 6 players. So you have 4 people who have reserved seats at your table who are coming to the event. And there are only 3 player tickets left at this event. There are 2 in hardcore mode and 3 for the other campaigns. And that's all the space that's left in this event. So I just want to say to those people watching, if you're like, yes, I want to get in that game, you better book now. If you wait, there will be one. Just saying. Yeah. So your campaign sounds like loads of fun. There's a little comedy dell'arte feeling, a little Venetian sounding setting. It's
Mhm.
called Bloodlines and Bloodlust. It's got vampires. Is it going to be super dark? Okay, let me just ask you, if you want to read about this, you can go to our website, dndandcastle.com/summer 2025. You can read about all of the campaigns that are being offered this summer. And you can find the write-up about Edward's campaign called Welcome to Citavita. Citavita? Tell me how you say that.
So Chila Vita, which means city of life. But yeah, it's a brand new homebrew setting. Like you say, very inspired by Venice, and born out of. I remember at the time. I was watching Castlevania Nocturne, and I was immersing myself in Assassin's Creed 2, and these two things kind of just like met in symbiosis. This whole kind of idea of vampires as a metaphor for an uncaring upper class, and also like I think the thing that really intrigued me um, in when I first started the setting was a lot of fantasy and D&D and a lot of literature is it sort of draws a lot of its influence from Anglo and Euro-Germanic myths and legends. And I kind of like found myself going down this rabbit hole of Italian mythology, and it's great. Like it's fascinating. There's like uh there are all of these weird and strange artifacts like Libro del Comando, which is a means of deciphering benign and evil spirits, and there's feline trickster demons, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm looking to fold into this very Venetian, very gothic setting that has all of the sort of harlequinade colors that you would expect. You mentioned commedia dell'arte, and there's a lot of that kind of theatricality running through the setting as well.
Very nice, very nice. And what's the uh, what's the draw here? What's the hook of this story of this campaign without spoilers? Can you give us a little
Well,
sort of t- teaser off the top of your head? There is a write up here, but tell us a little bit in your own words.
so the City of Life has long been pulled between three masters. There's the Court of the Doge, the Church of the Papacy, and its Inquisition, and the mysterious vampire courts. And they live in this uneasy harmony, all three. And it is a balance that has existed for centuries, with the citizens of Cittadivita little more than taxpayers and puppets, or to the latter, food. And our story begins on the holy day of Il Giorno Bianco, a public holiday that marks the end of summer and the beginning of the rainy season of autumn. And it is on this day that this tense alliance finally starts to break, and vendettas come to a head, and machinations that have been centuries in the making begin to unfold. and our player characters will be caught in the middle of this, and it will be up to them whether this city lives or whether it dies. So it is a lot of social intrigue,
Mhm, mhm.
and because of its inspirations, a lot of running around on rooftops and fighting vampires, and basically unpicking conspiracies, going into the depths of the city, as well as its very heights, high society balls, as well as making your way through dark and oppressive sewers, which hide aeons of knowledge. And so, yeah, that is kind of the basic gist of the story. Um, like you say, without spoiling too much. But yeah,
That's fun.
it's very much going to be exploring the gulf that exists between rich and poor, the what it means to have true influence and true power, and what it means to start a revolution as well. Something
Oh,
which I'm sure is on a lot of people's
very
mind.
timely.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, a lot of foresight there. You've never been to D&D in a castle before. What enticed you to want to come and run a game for us at D&D in a castle and to be part of this particular event?
I mean, God, who hasn't in their home group gone, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to do this in a castle?" Like, everyone has had that conversation. Um, but honestly, like, I mean, setting aside being a DM, just d that experience to come and, be GM'd by some of the best GMs in the world, and sit at a table with strangers and undergo this very intense experience over 4 days, doing something that not only that you love, but everyone in that castle loves. And you're in a castle, you know. But as a GM as well, I think, it definitely there's a it's intimidating. It's intimidating,
Mm.
this idea of crafting a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and you don't have weeks with which to do it. You have days, you have hours, in order to make sure that every single beat lands and hits. And I think that challenge is very, very exciting. I'd spoken to a number of other GMs who have been lucky enough to um, run tables at D&D in a castle, and all of them spoke about that.
Yeah,
It's like running a marathon. It's like a sport. It's there's no letting up, but also there is this intense feeling of collaboration, which I think is so key. You mentioned escapism, but there's also that collaboration that comes through play. I think that again, I think we lose as we get older, and to not just imagine your surroundings, but to be in your surroundings. Those, you know, stones which hold so many stories and so much history, and to just sit within that space, soak that in, and to tell your own, and then to walk away and carry those stories with you. I think yeah, to be able to facilitate that, I think it is an immense privilege and one I'm very much looking forward to.
yeah. Um, have you been able to play in this kind of format before, like with a so a lot of people have played, they played online, especially people who joined, kind of got really into it in the pandemic. They've done a lot of online gaming or home games. Most people have had, long running campaigns that have gone for months, years, whatever, and then or played one shots and conventions, that are sort of or done streams that are a certain number of episodes. But this particular format of intensive back-to-back days where nothing you're doing nothing but playing D&D all day, basically, eat, sleep, roll dice style. Is that an experience you've had before, or would this
Not
be
to
a
this
first?
level. Not to this level. I think the closest thing I can equate it to is when you're doing a theatre run and you're just doing like 3 shows a day, 5 days a week. Like, it's akin to that, I think. But with the added caveat, it's improv. It's all improvised, and you all get to get caught up in that whirlwind together. Um, there've certainly been days and games I've played where you're running a couple a week and you're doing one after the other, or you catch up and you're just playing a D&D game for like 10 hours for a day rather. But to do that 4 days in a row, uh, No, and that is thrilling.
It's going to be a lot of fun. People, you said about telling these stories together, and people, we've had people tell us, these stories are ones that stay with them kind of forever. People have
Mm.
put these stories into novelized form to remember them by, and it's really an experience of a lifetime. You said that you've talked to some of the people who've run games at the castle before. I know one of them is Jasper Cartwright, who is one of the people who recommended we speak with you and invite you to the castle, and who has run games for us many times, and is one of our most popular dungeon masters as well. Have you worked with any of our other dungeon masters before as well? Um,
I mean, each of the three Black Halflings, so Liv Kennedy, Jeremy Cobb, and Jasper, we've worked together in sort of different projects, different series, different games, and collaborated on a number of different um, sort of pieces of escapism, I guess. But yeah, no one else. So this will be my first time meeting Beth the Bard. I had the privilege of meeting Hannah at PAX Unplugged, who is an absolute delight. And also, by the way, her table, the pitch for her story, sounds incredible. Because she was on, was it last week? She
She
had
was she
her
was
VK.
yeah, she was our guest last week, and she was talking about it.
Yeah.
It's funny you said that, because my mom came to me and said, I listened to all of these, because she's my mom, and she's like, that was the one that made me really want to play D&D.
Ooh, interesting. So
So
does it
I think
does
this
does
sounds
your
very
mum
familiar.
play or?
No. No, we always say my brother's the D&D and I'm the castle. Obviously, I'm deep in the D&D world, but he's the really hardcore player. And we started this company together some
Mm.
years ago. So that's the sort of partnership. But yeah, Hannah sounds wonderful. Who else is at this event in the summer? B. Dave, Thor,
Mhm.
and then we have our hardcore mode as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm missing somebody. I'm going to be embarrassed when I realize I've missed them. But yeah, great
Uh,
lineup. Lots of cool people that are going to be at this castle. It is a smaller castle, so that's something interesting. This venue, this will be the first time we're working at this venue, and
yeah.
it is half the size of the other castle in the UK that we usually work with. It's closer in size to the American castle that we work with. So there'll only be 6 tables at this castle. And
Oh.
when this company started, the first event that we did was about 6 castles. It was in France, and then the subsequent ones were sort of 3 to 6 tables big. So this is sort of a harking back to our early days, and it was very small, very intimate. And the lovely thing about that is you really get to know everybody. Even as the organizer, and we've been doing this for several years and have had hundreds of guests, I still know most of them by name, because I interact with them personally. It's a very sort of close up, small gathering. So you really do get to know everybody, and everybody does become kind of like a family, a community, um, at the castle over the course of the week. I'm wondering, you are from Britain. Oh, I have a couple of questions. How do you approach character creation? We have reserved with you already, Edward. Looking forward to it. So this is one of your guests
Oh
for the castle who's wondering
my
about character
goodness.
creation. And I do just want to say, just in as a sort of FAQ answer, that 2 months before the castle, or more, 2 to 3 months before the castle, we put everybody into an online platform where they talk about character creation. So you will get an opportunity as a player to get direct guidance from your dungeon master. They will have character creation outline, sort of parameters that will be available to you from the time you get into that. We call it the online tavern, the digital tavern, where everybody gathers and meets. But tell us how you approach character creation.
Well, Jonathan, if I've not put you off too much with this interview, so the way in which I tend to approach character creation is a lot of yes anding between the two of us. So, like I say, I'll draft up a world building document which I'm creating at the moment. Lots of lovely, lovely royalty-free art of Venice, which I've been incorporating. But you'll receive that, and the exciting thing about this particular homebrew setting is there are a whole bunch of bespoke subclasses as well. So you'll receive that in advance of the campaign. And then, in addition to that, I will send you maybe a page, maybe a page and a half of character questions. And as soon as I receive that back, we will essentially start private back and forth between the two of us. I will ask you questions about your answers, and we can flesh them out. So, let's say you have a sister, but you haven't spoken to that sister for a long time. I might go, right, what was the reason for that? And we'll really flesh that out between the two of us, and we will essentially like create um, a, a vast web with which like I can pull on various threads throughout the campaign. But I do believe that ultimately I'm a facilitator. And I think especially in this circumstance, because everyone's traveling from so far, like it really should feel like your story. And so for me, if I can offer things that will help, either in terms of the world, so I might go, "Ooh, you mentioned that you lived on a farmstead. So in this setting, there is this area around here. It sort of is known for this particular crop. That might explain how you ended up delivering, I don't know, like wheat or bread to this particular area of the city, which may be why you have a connection there." And we will have that sort of back and forth, establishing not only like the very practical parameters of the characters, but also the emotional ones as well, because I think that's what tethers you to a story. Um, and there may be things that I ask, like, "What do you want?" Like, I remember one time a player telling me that I want my character to die in this story, and so I said, "Great, can that be our opening scene? And then the rest of our campaign is a flashback to that point." So we started with that moment, and none of the other players knew about it. But because we had had that discussion beforehand, we were able to set up this very safe way in which that could happen. And then in this very kind of like noirish and cinematic way, that was our framing device. So yeah, a very collaborative is the short answer to that very rambly one that I gave you.
Nice. Also, someone wants to know this crafted setting and story that you're creating for D&D in the Castle. Are you intending to use it in any online watchable actual plays?
I have been considering it. I've had this setting in mind for a while, and I've not really done anything with it. I'd sort of got halfway through the world building document, but there was never really a home for it. And then it was only really Tara when you sort of we had our meeting, and you said, right, so if you can just send me like the pitch for your campaign, and and this was the first thing that sprang to mind. This sort of thing that had kind of lingered in the back of my brain for such a long
Mhm,
time, and
mhm.
all of these ideas and accumulated notes, and it just seemed, I think, especially given all that we've said about the setting of D&D in a castle, it just felt very right. Um, but yeah, I mean, potentially, it is a setting that I might bring back, either online or, if I'm lucky enough to be invited back for future D&D in the castles, it may see a return there, the continuing story of Chidavita. I'm not sure yet. I guess we'll see how people respond to it.
Lovely. Love it. So this will be a first chance to try this, to play in this original setting and story for the first time as it's being rolled out. So that's exciting. But as I said, if you want to play at D&D in a Castle with Edward as your dungeon master, there are only 2 tickets left at his table and only 3 in the entire event. So you definitely want to get on that, and you can click the or scan the QR code here, or there are links being displayed. It's theindianacastle.com. You can send us an email, find us on socials. Um, it's real people behind all of those things. We'd love to answer all of your questions and so on. So we are reaching the end of our time. Edward, I'm going to ask you to take us out with an invitation to the viewers to come and join you in your campaign at D&D in a Castle this summer. That's July 13th to 17 in Darlington, UK.
Well, I would love to have you at my table. You couldn't ask for more of a wealth of talent at this castle, and I would be immensely privileged if you would choose mine. We're going to tell a beautiful, emotional, very dark, but ultimately very hopeful story, and it will be crafted by you and you alone. And I cannot wait to witness it. So I hope to see as many of you there as possible for an unforgettable story. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Edward, and we'll see you at the castle. Cannot wait. In the meantime, take care.